I'm going to put a headline out there. This week, California voted Republican but didn't realize it on crime, tax, minimum wage, rent control. They're Republican votes, basically. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Steve Hilton Show. It's our regular weekly episode, but it is, of course, a special episode because we are taping this on Thursday, November the 7th, 2 days after an absolutely epic, historic victory for Donald Trump in the presidential election. Republicans taking the Senate looks like by more than anyone expected. A very, very good night indeed. Looks like the House is going to be still a Republican majority. A very, very good night indeed. And we've got a dream team here to reflect on all of that, the national results, but also the California results, because there's some incredibly interesting results in California. And here are the ladies who joined me before. You remember our special episode of Voter Guide that we did for you? Well, they're back now that you've voted to guide us through the aftermath. So just going in order, Katy Grimes, editor-in-chief of the California Globe, Susan Shelley, who's both of them regulars, and Jen Horn, Susan Shelley from Southern California News Group. I always want to say Orange County Register, but it's more than that, isn't it, Susan? So I'm going to get that right. That's where I read you most. And obviously from Howard Jarvis, taxpayers, very interesting news on some of the things that Howard Jarvis has been instrumental in this time. And Jen Horn, AM 870, The Morning Answer. Fantastic to see you all. I'm just going to quickly say one thing. There's so much to say about the election. Maybe you've seen me on Fox reacting to it on the night. Actually, I'm going to say two things. One sort of personal thing that for our audience, just so that they appreciate how special that night was for me, beyond just the politics and so on. You may have seen, if you were watching Fox News, that I was literally on air, and I was cut off mid-sentence as I was about to complete my thought. But as I've said, I've never been so happy to be cut off mid-sentence, because I was literally cut off as we went live to New York for Bret Baier to call the race for Donald Trump. It was an incredibly special moment for me. I was just reflecting on it. How amazing that here I am, a new American, casting my vote in a presidential election for the first time for our president. I actually spoke to President Trump on election day. And there I was on air on Fox News on the most watched show in America. For the election coverage, literally on air as the result was called. It was just an incredibly special thing. Only in America could that happen. I was so personally, just really, really special moment for me. And then the bigger point I wanted to make, the political point, is actually, of course, we can get into the details and how this was, how this happened, and Kamala and Trump and all that kind of stuff. But funny enough, just listening to the aftermath and the way that you see elite media now, it's kind of, is agonizing about how this happened. And I've just been listening to the local NPR show here in California, in the Bay Area. It's just really stunning to me when you look at the left and the elite media and the Democratic, not all of them, but most of them. There's just a complete lack of empathy and humanity when they say, how could anyone vote for Trump? They have no clue, no ability to put themselves in the shoes of people without their wealth and their privilege, just regular working people who've had real pain caused in their lives by these Democrat policies, whether on the economy and climate and all the rest of it. It's just the pain that people have been going through, and they want to change, and they want someone who hears that and understands that is going to fix the basics of the country, so you can have a reasonable life and earn enough to raise your family, not worry financially, and own your own home and all those basic things. That's what Trump was offering. And the cluelessness that they still have as they're trying to process this result is really stunning to me. And I think it really is a big part of the explanation for why they lost. They're just totally out of touch with regular people's lives. So that I don't want to sort of hog the whole time. So over to our guest today. So Katy, let's start with you. Your reflections on the overall result.
Joy. Our side experienced an awful lot of joy on Tuesday night and early into the morning. It was interesting because I think this election was a very simple issue election. It came down to economics and, of course, inflation, et cetera, the crime issues and the border. But for most people, I really do believe that white middle class that the left kept claiming was the only thing Trump had voting for him turned out to be the Latino middle class, the Black middle class, the Asian middle class, the white middle class. But they're tired of hurting financially. And I really think that was a huge part of the message. As for the media, most of the media are left. We know that. And I have found far too many people on the left have no ability to self-reflect. So their heads were exploding. And we're going to continue to see this childish, toddler-like reaction from them rather than a little moment of inward thought about, could we be wrong? Because they're not. And so this is going to continue.
Susan.
This, I think, is the first wave of the reaction to the COVID pandemic response. There are a lot of different groups of people who were not paying attention to politics, and then politics started paying attention to them in the worst possible way. And they were open to finding information on the internet. I think we saw that all through the pandemic, that people were open to looking for information. They were censored on the internet for sharing it by the government, as it turns out, and there's litigation all over the place over that. I think what you saw here was a realignment and a complete rejection of the so-called legacy media in favor of podcasts, Twitter, long form. People say, oh, they have a short attention span. They're sucking up 3-hour podcasts. 20-year-old guys are watching 3-hour podcasts. I don't want to hear about short attention spans. People are hungry for real information and authenticity. And I think that's part of the story here.
Really interesting. Jen?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with Katy and with Susan that this was just a better set of issues for Republicans. Republicans were standing for freedom, and Democrats were standing for bigger government. But I also think more than that, the left in this country has gone so far to the left, almost into Marxist territory, that this was a complete repudiation, I think, from the American people, saying it has gone too far. And, it's really interesting. Steve, you brought up the reaction, people who are responding to this right now. And you hear Kamala Harris's camp blaming Joe Biden. You hear people blaming Kamala Harris. The idea is it's not one single person. I mean, Kamala Harris, I'm not trying to defend her, but she was put in a pretty incredibly difficult situation, and she's not a strong candidate, so she couldn't get herself out of there. But the issues, the actions of the Democrat Party and what they have become in our country is what this slapback was from the American people. And I'm so happy to see it. And just one other note, it wasn't in a small way. This wasn't even close. And so I think that's really important for our country and our psyche. Even if people are sad because they lost, at least we know, at least it was a mandate. The popular vote, huge shifts in people, in voters in Illinois and New York and even in California. That's the silver lining for me in all of this, is not only do we win, but we win in a way that was a mandate. And I think that's so important for our country.
Yeah, you see, that's the thing. It's very interesting. Let's just take that round one more time, because that's the thing that I think most bothers them. I can hear it in their reaction, which is like, and it's so patronizing, some of the reaction. Oh, well, I don't recognize my country, or and the way they, I mean, some of them are saying, this, I'm disappointed in America, whatever, all this kind of stuff. It's so offensive. But it is that popular vote. I mean, the combination of the total clean sweep of the battlegrounds and the decisive Electoral College victory and the Senate races, and it looks like the House, and the popular vote, and not just the popular vote victory, but the fact that it's over 50%. That's the other thing. I think I'm right. That's really amazing. And on top of that, all these demographics moving in Trump's direction, the Republican direction, and especially the one that they can't get their heads around is women. Like, how could women vote for him? And it's just because that gender gap is still there, but I think less than it was with Biden. It's just an amazing set of results, and the comprehensive nature of the victory. I think. Okay, let's go around again, Katy. I think that's one of the things that's really both encouraging. It's a real mandate, as Jen said, but it's also should be a wake-up call for them.
It should be. I agree. I think what happened on Tuesday, it took me back to 1980, which was the first election I ever voted in. And Americans were rejecting the direction that the Carter administration had taken us. And it had that same feeling. And the youth vote was huge that year.
Yes.
It was
and
fantastic.
This year,
Yeah, exactly.
Trump won first-time voters. It's an
Yes.
incredible thing. And they're doing incredibly well with the 18 to 29 category.
Yes.
And going back to the point about the podcast and all of that, amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is. I think, and I totally agree with Susan on the reaction to COVID. We had hoped for it a little more in 22, didn't happen. This time, I think more eyes were opened. People needed to have almost 4 years of the Biden administration to realize it wasn't going to get better. It was, in fact, getting worse, and they were doubling down on their bad policies, which are not policies that help Americans at all. The average American voter, I think I think it was the pissed off vote too.
Yes. I want to just, with Susan, I want to talk with you about the Democrat campaign and finish with you, Jen, on the Republican campaign before we move to California. Susan, the thing that's interesting to me when you look at their excuses is, I mean, my favorite one is, and this almost is like this has been sent out by the machine as a talking point, very quickly, was because they were all saying the same thing. Well, Kamala Harris, she only had 107 days to introduce herself to the country. And I think, what? And the implication being that if she had more time, she'd have done better. No, I think she'd had more time. It would have been even worse. The more that people saw her, the less they liked her. Her best time was right at the beginning. I said to my wife last night, we were just chatting about it. Well, like if they'd have put her in 30 days before, maybe she'd have gotten away with it.
One of the things that I think went wrong here is that they looked at the polling that said people prefer Democrats on the issue of abortion. So they went all in on abortion, and then they were disappointed that women vote on more issues than just that. And I think in particular, they lost a lot of women on the stuff involving children. And again, back to the COVID pandemic, shutting the schools and forcing the vaccines and all of this kind of stuff. You can't go to graduation unless you're up to date on your vaccines. I saw that close up in California. I was mortified by what they were doing to healthy children who were at no risk of dying from COVID or transmitting it to their grandparents or anything like that. And they were tormented. I think a lot of women took offense at that. And then this gender stuff where California and other states are talking about we're not going to tell the parents if the kids want to use different pronouns in kindergarten. And it's horrifying to people. Abortion's not the only issue that women care about.
And so, Jen, let's look at the Trump campaign, because I just think, on so many levels, I mean, we can't leave this discussion without going on about without mentioning how they went on and on and on, with the fascism and the Hitler and the just insane, rhetoric. One of my favorite moments, actually, in this sort of post-election analysis, I saw Kat Timpf last night on Gutfeld. She had this brilliant point about the media. She said, "Well, a lot of the people say the media are overreacting." She said, "No, I think they're underreacting. What are we talking about? They were on before the election saying that Trump was going to arrest them and put them in camps and put journalists. So, I mean, what are they doing openly on television? They should be in hiding if they really meant." Of course, they didn't mean any of this stuff. No. But they said it anyway. And what was interesting to me was the contrast. I mean, you used the word joy at the beginning, Katy, but actually the Trump campaign, it was just, I thought this was the best version of Trump that we've seen, right? He, I've, been supporting him from day one. So everyone knows that. But he just seemed, the humor came out more. Everyone who knows him knows this about him. This is not a new Trump. It's just that more of it was public, right? He was more funny. The campaign was just authentic and real and humor and the brilliant things like the McDonald's thing and the way that he turned around the garbage remark from Biden. And even things like when he went on stage, I think it was one of the best moments of the entire campaign when he went on stage wearing the high-vis vest. And then he was just telling the story about his team wanted him to wear it. And he said, no, I got to wear my jacket. And they said, oh, it makes you look thinner. He says, oh, thinner. They're not. Brilliant. No one's ever done that. Just the charm was there. And of course, the people who think he's Hitler can't see that. But I thought it was just a really, really, as well as the mechanics of the campaign, the kind of emotional connection and the authenticity of the Trump campaign was just, absolutely brilliant this time.
When Donald Trump talks like he did in that rally, I laughed as well. We all felt that moment when he says, oh, I look thinner, so I'm keeping this vest on. Or my favorite moment, when he said that he was nervous about trying to get up in the garbage truck. Remember, he said, that's a big step. I didn't want to fall in front of everybody. I mean, these are really human things. And I think that's what we saw this time around with President Trump. We got to see even more of his humanity, which I think he's done before, but I think we got more of it. And that's simply because so much has been thrown at him. But I too have been a Trump supporter since day one. Back in 2016, the escalator moment, he had me. He was talking about things other people wouldn't. I think he has an incredible gift of connecting with people from all walks of life. I also want to say that his campaign this time around was much more organized. They actually, it seemed, had goals that they were working towards. It didn't seem like everybody was just kind of throwing stuff at a wall. It seemed very organized because they have done this before. And I think we all realize that as Americans, that this election was really important. And what I am so happy about today, I'm ecstatic that Trump won. I'm ecstatic that we have wins, which we'll talk about in California. But what makes me the happiest is that I think Republicans finally woke up, and instead of feeling sad about an election being stolen or about our vote or our ballots being safe and secure or feeling like there's no chance, Republicans now know that when we work, we can win elections in this country. And that's a huge wake-up call. And it's something that we've actually copied, I think, from Democrats in California, where they get out there and they organize. We did it better this time. We voted early. A lot of people volunteered. They worked outside of their own state. I was doing text messages in Pennsylvania and phone calls in Arizona. I mean, people were really working. And so I think the takeaway is that, number one, well done to the RNC. That leadership change was necessary. But number two, they were able to message to the Republican voters to give them hope again. And I think that is going to pay us in dividends as we go to the next election and the one beyond that.
It's a really great point, the campaign. And I think it was just that perfect combination where you had a very, very well-run machine. Because you remember going back in the day, going right back to the beginning of Trump, the conversation was, well, he's just not a normal candidate. And so you can't expect him to have a normal campaign. And there's this debate about whether you put him in a box and make him behave like a candidate, or there's that phrase that became very famous, let Trump be Trump. Yes. But then is that, the question was, is that undisciplined and whatever? This time it seemed to be the perfect combination. You had a very, very professional, disciplined machine, but, supporting him, but he didn't have to change who he was at all. In fact, he was more himself than previously. And it was just the perfect combination. And you've got to give credit to, again, you say Susie Wiles, who's the campaign manager, Chris LaCivita, but he hired those people. And so it's, in the end, it's a good hiring decision. And I remember being at an event. I remember when him introducing me to her when I saw him, back in, that must have been 2021 in Mar-a-Lago, 22. I can't remember exactly. And saying, this is Susie. She's fantastic. She's going to, she's transformed Florida. She's responsible for Florida going from a swing state to safe Republican. That's where she, really did a lot of campaigns, and she's fantastic. So he clearly rates her. But then the other thing I noticed was when I've been to a few events with the two of them there, Chris LaCivita and Susie Wiles, he was just you could tell he really respected them and just listened to them and took them. That's the other thing that's so ridiculous about that Mark Cuban comment. You never see. There's so many sort of famous things we'll come back to from this campaign. That ridiculous thing about that you never see strong. Was it strong? Intelligent women around Trump. Amazing. I think we're going to see a lot in the new Trump administration.
Yes.
So let's move to California. Well, we're in terms of the conversation. I think I'm going to put a headline out there and I'm going to ask you to react to it and unpack it. It's a headline that, not a real one yet. I am planning to write this, but here's the way I want to put it. This week, California voted Republican, but didn't realize it. So, Jen, take that.
I think you're right. And again, I would actually just correlate this to people are sick and tired. It's the boomerang effect. You push the boomerang too far, it's going to snap back. And California did. I feel so good about the results. Sure, we didn't win everything. We didn't win every race or every proposition, but the biggest victory, I think, for us is Proposition 36. That was a huge win. The fact that Proposition 5 failed, the fact that we got rid of George Gascon and brought Nathan Hochman in as DA in LA County. These are the things that people are sick and tired of feeling like they can't go outside in their front yard, or they can't send their kids out to play, or they can't go to Macy's to buy a pair of shoes without looking over their shoulder. So the Democrats have run the state into the ground. We are now digging ourselves out. And I think the people in California, whether they realize it or not, because they've just had enough, are going to start making some really, really good decisions moving forward.
So, Susan, do you pick up, obviously, Prop 5 central to what you've been working on? That was so, the other two, I'd love you to to, I'm not going to lead you tell me what you think, because you've got the pair of bonds that look like I mean, by the way, we should all say it's now like 2 days after the election, and we still have 50 odd percent in most races, 50% in. So these results may change, and we have to wait. I can't stand it. It's so, they condescending, the way they on the media stage, these warnings, like, we have to be patient. Sometimes it takes days or even weeks to get results. Not anywhere else.
Right.
It's just so ridiculous.
4 days as we all sit here together. It's unreal.
Anyway, so the reason I mentioned that in the context of I'd like you to take the bonds and Prop 5 together, Susan, is, I mean, Prop 2 and Prop 4, the bonds, I mean, we were very strongly against them, as we look like they're close but going to pass. But Prop 5 looks pretty comfortably going to be defeated, right?
I think so. The last number I saw was 56% no statewide. And this is a tremendously good development for California, because this was an attack on Proposition 13 on taxpayer protections that go all the way back to 1879. The 2/3 vote to pass local debt goes back to 1879 to prevent abuses, is what the legislature was told. You must restrict local debt in order to prevent abuses. Well, we've seen plenty of abuses with local debt and with statewide debt. There's too much of it. So it was a tremendous victory for taxpayers to defeat Prop 5 and to tell the people who put that forward, which was the legislature, hands off Prop 13. Just hands off. Just stop. Because they always have plans to come back in the next election and attack it again and try to drive people out of their homes through higher taxes. And that just has to be stopped. And of course, that's what the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association is all about, protecting people from these huge irrational tax increases based on the value of their property. And this was a really important victory to restrict local debt. A lot of different government agencies had plans to put billions and billions of dollars of debt on the current ballot and the next ballot. So that has been stopped. Tremendous victory for the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association, which really did this campaign alone.
Yes.
With the help of everybody on this call in the media who was helping to amplify that message. But this was a small, low-budget campaign, just getting the word out that this was going to result in tax increases. So it's a tremendous victory.
And then on Props 2 and 4, it looks like they're going to go through, right?
Props 2 and 4 have been called yes by the AP. So yes, that's going to be another $20 billion of bond debt for the people of California. And it's worth noting, particularly on Prop 4, that because the legislature failed to fund these important priorities in the budget, like clean water, like fire mitigation, because they took those out of the budget, the voters of California were left to try and patch up the problem by borrowing money. But now everything's going to cost twice as much, because you're going to have to pay the interest over 35 or 40 years. So Prop 2 is a school bond. That is going to be the usual thing where it's first come, first serve for the money. And then they'll come back to us in 2 or 4 years and say, oh, we still have asbestos in the walls and we need more borrowed money to fix it. This is like year 35 of that same story. So I'm sorry that passed.
Yeah, but let's just to sort of complete the conversation around this set of issues. I mean, I think it would be right to characterize. I mean, I sometimes think in, whatever analogy you want to use, but I often talk about tactics versus strategy. So tactically, 2 and 4 are a defeat, right? Right now, yes, we're going to be saddled with more tax increases,
right.
Totally unjustified, and that's bad news. But the Prop 5 victory strategically is more important. I mean, that's a bigger deal, because that covers all potential tax increases.
Right.
At the local level in particular. So right. I think is that the right way of thinking about it? Yes, of course we wanted all three of these to go the right way, but if you had to pick one, you'd want Prop 5, right?
Right. Well, the difference is that state bonds do not immediately result in a tax increase, but local bonds do. Local bonds are repaid with charges on the property tax bill. So every time a local bond passes, your property taxes go up. If you rent, your landlord's property taxes go up. If you shop, your store's property taxes went up, and you wind up paying for it directly as a consumer. So this is a really big deal. Prop 5 made it easier to do that. It cut the threshold for passing local debt from 2/3 to 55%. It would have been much easier to pass these tax increases. So that's really a big deal. The state debt is just going to be one more thing for the legislature to deal with. Fortunately for California, President Trump is going to be good for the economy. That's going to make the stock market do well. That's going to create more revenue for California because of the tax code here in this state. So we might get away with it. It might be okay.
Trump saves California.
While they sue him over everything he's doing, he's going to save California.
By the way, there was a brilliant piece in the Wall Street Journal editorial just before the election, which was like Gavin Newsom, how Gavin Newsom will help elect Trump. It was about how there's a couple of things, but particularly how the policies were, that are driving people out of California, perhaps increasing the Republican vote in neighboring battleground states like Nevada and Arizona, but also the way that the way in which the climate policies are just causing the pain that is just very evident everywhere else. So I just thought that was a really interesting argument. Katy, your thoughts on the California results?
I think that definitely the Trump win, certainly we figured it was going to help the down ballot races in California. And I think all the way down to the local level, as we've talked about before. The last election, we saw kind of the rise of the grassroots parent movement, which was huge. I think we're going to see more local people running for offices locally, which is so important. I am still crossing my fingers and toes that our existing congressional members, Mike Garcia, Michelle Steele, Ken Calvert, we hope Scott Baugh wins. I'm really hopeful. I hope I'm not being naive. And Jen, I actually listened to you and Grant this morning on the radio talk to Mike Garcia. So we're pulling for that one. I think it looks good from what I'm hearing.
I think so too. I tried to ask him how this compared with 2020 and 2022, and he says he feels optimistic. I mean, one of the great things about being a politician in California is you learn very quickly. I mean, literally his races have been, I called it hand-to-hand combat earlier today. His first race was determined by 333 votes. I mean, it's insane. And so he's got a ballot curing operation and he goes to work after election day. And I think you learn very quickly that each race, it's not just election day, but it's the 37 days after election day when you really have to fight to secure your win. But he seems cautiously optimistic. He's even said that to me in text messages. Young Kim, I think AP already called her race. Michelle Steele looks good. Ken Calvert had a good day as well, up about 6,000 votes. So hopefully, and if we can pick up Scott Baugh, I mean, that would be a great day for California Republicans.
And that's interesting. I mean, right. Let's look about the House races. A huge amount of money and focus went into the House races. I'm just looking at the latest numbers there. I mean, the pickup, obviously, the big one that everyone's talking about, Scott Baugh, and that's looking good in Orange County. But there's a couple of others as well that are really close still. I mean, the one that people just weren't talking about is Kevin Lincoln. So it's near you, isn't it, Katy?
Yes, Stockton.
So I'm looking at the latest numbers there. It's really close. It's 50.7% for the Democrat, 49.3%. It's really close for Kevin Lincoln. I mean, I don't know what are you hearing there? That felt like the least likely pickup, but he's doing very well, it seems.
Not hearing that much other than he's hanging on. I think John Duarte is the other one that was close. I haven't seen the numbers today.
I think they might call it, actually, from what I heard.
He's ahead. Yeah, that's looking good.
Good.
Where's the other one? I just had him on the show. I'm just looking down this list. It takes ages to get to
Gunderson.
Gunderson, exactly. Yeah. So Gunderson.
Not so great. I mean, he's close, but he is losing.
That's that's 71% in, and there's a 2% gap. So I don't think there's. So we'll see. Look, it's if we can protect everything we have, so not lose any and gain one. That's fantastic. That adds that's an extra seat on the majority for Speaker Johnson. That's great.
Yeah,
I mean, they really believed that they would flip the House to California. That does not look like it's going to happen at all.
No, I don't think we're going to have another 2018. That's for sure. These are good, solid candidates also. And that was an issue in previous years. I think California's done a really good job putting forth solid people and acknowledging the issues they have in their various districts. Like John Duarte, he has to be very aware of labor issues and, of course, the ag community. And these are important for voters to recognize.
So I just wanted to quickly talk about some other races because that are high profile, but maybe not as high profile as they should be. So big conversation about George Gascon. You mentioned that, Jen. But if you put the crime story together, so this is a really massive, rejection of the pro-crime agenda from the far left that's been dominant for so long, because it's a bunch of things together. Obviously, Prop 36, massive victory there, massive victory for Nathan Hochman and rejection of George Gascon. But also here in the Bay Area where I am, you have a double whammy because you've got Pamela, you've got another, not as well known as George Gascon, but Pamela Paul, the Alameda County DA, recalled. And Alameda County, let's remember, that's where Oakland is. Oakland is like total disaster in terms of the crime and chaos. I mean, really falling apart. So they kicked out the DA there and the mayor. So that's a big
Yes.
result in Oakland.
That's the boomerang effect again. Remember the ACLU was writing to tell people they got it wrong about sending the police away out of Oakland. I mean, this is a city that has seen what these policies are going to do. And that's what's happening to the Democrats who are thinking, well, maybe we're just not going to buy every Democrat candidate that's put in front of us. We have to start rejecting some. I think that really ties back into the story of this election. It went too far.
And then let's add to that. I mean, I don't think she's as bad, not nearly, and San Francisco isn't as bad as Oakland, not by a long way. Oakland really is unbelievable how far that's fallen so quickly. But San Francisco, London Breed kicked out.
Yeah.
People want change. They don't want the continuation of this far left nonsense.
Exactly. I think we're going to see that throughout, not just crazy California, but some of the other blue states are probably going to be realizing these kinds of results as well.
And so Joe's going right back up to the presidential level, but in California as well. So think about that as a statewide race. So a massive shift to the Republicans statewide, if you think about it that way. I mean, there was a chart, Susan, I don't know if you want to pick this up. There was a chart I saw the Financial Times put out where they showed every state and the move to the right, which was basically every single state, the move to Republican. The arrow was red. They showed it that way, and it was and one of the biggest moves. We're still looking at we haven't got the final data, of course, because it's California, but there's no question that the shift from Democrat to Republican, one of the biggest in the country, was here in California.
There's an interesting, puzzling result, I think, in the rent control defeat. Proposition 33 was going to unleash local rent control, and everybody's rent burdened and everybody's paying too much for housing in California. And we have this terrible homelessness problem, which many people blame on the cost of housing. And yet, here was a measure that you would think, especially in Los Angeles, where we have practically a socialist city council getting elected, literally in some cases, it failed. I'm looking at the Los Angeles numbers on Prop 33, and it's 57% no in LA County. And it's failing, of course, statewide. And that's a good thing, because rent control is a disastrous policy. But it's just interesting, I think, that it fails so decisively in what you would think would be a state that would be housing is a human right, we're just taking it kind of thing. And the voters of California are economically conservative, which is really interesting.
And I think that's right. And you can add to that the minimum number, Prop 32, which was, it's closer, right? But right now I'm looking at the numbers. So the one you just mentioned, rent control, that's 62% no, overall. Right. Yeah, Prop 33, 62% no statewide. The minimum wage, raising the minimum wage. Again, you would think that with and again, I've made the argument very clearly that this is the Democrat doom loop. They have these extreme policies, particularly on climate, that make everything more expensive. Then they realize everything's too expensive and they say, oh, wow, we got to raise the minimum wage to help people. And and of course, that makes everything more expensive because it adds to businesses' costs, etc. So you've got this negative doom loop. And so the answer to the actual answer to the cost of living situation that people have is to reduce the costs that government imposes on people and businesses. And then that's the way to do it. Anyway, you would think, just as with rent control, raising the minimum wage would be popular. But no, looks like that's going to be defeated.
I think so. And it's passing in Los Angeles. So 52.5% at the last count want to raise the minimum wage of Los Angeles voters. And Los Angeles voters approved Measure A, which is a sales tax increase, at least at last tally, it was leading. a sales tax increase for the same homelessness problems, but the message went out from a number of mailers that there was no tax increase. So I think people were just fooled. And we didn't have the resources at Howard Jarvis to inform all the voters in Los Angeles. It's 4 million people. Or actually, it's 10 million in the county, 10 million people in the county, 5 million voters, to inform everybody that this was a sales tax increase. I think they're going to be rudely surprised when they find out what they just did, because the sales tax is very high in Los Angeles County. It's going to be 10.75% in some places.
I mean, that's well. But I'm glad you brought up the rent control one, Susan, because in a way that was what I was driving at with that sort of headline at the top that I said, California voted Republican but didn't realize it. If you put together Prop 36, Prop 5, which limits tax increases, rent control, and minimum wage on these, they're Republican votes basically. On all those measures, on crime, tax, minimum wage, rent control, voted Republican, basically. And so that's really interesting. Jen Horn had to leave us and get busy. It's a busy time for all of us. So I just want to put this one to you, Katy, the Trump vote. The last numbers we've got, he's over 40%, which is a big, big increase.
Yes.
From last time round was about 34, I believe. Look, President Trump said, I think I can win California. He's not winning California this time. But it's a very, very... I just want to reflect on that number because the way the media sometimes talks about it, and California is such a deep blue state and, forever a Democrat, and Trump is, all the language about Hitler and Nazi, you'd think this is the kind of place where people really believe that. Well, over 40% of Californians voted for Hitler here in this state.
Yeah, they must be fascists also. Remember, I told you in 2022, I had a chance to interview Donald Trump. And the first thing out of his mouth when we sat down was, I don't think California is really a blue state, is it? And he smiled. And I said, actually, I agree with you, because when you look at the voter registration throughout the state, it's, blue concentration, of course, in LA, San Francisco, San Diego, Sacramento, but the rest shows pretty red. And so I'm just so pleased that the get out the vote efforts and the registration efforts of additional Republicans in California have been so successful the last couple of years. I think we're going to see even a better turnout than what we have right now.
And Susan, on the other statewide race, apart from the propositions, was the U.S. Senate race, Schiff Garvey. I mean, we all know what we think about Adam Schiff. I do get a lot of feedback on social media, like, how on earth can Adam Schiff be elected to anything statewide? But again, look, it's not 50%, but I mean, Garvey's knocking on the door of 43% in that race. I don't know. I mean, these are big. If you compare it to the narrative of how democratic California is, even a number that's in the 40s challenges that idea that California is so blue.
Well, that's absolutely true. And if the Republican Party in California wanted to win, if they wanted to win the Senate race, if they wanted to win the governor's race, they absolutely could. But they have decided that they can't. The leadership of the California Republican Party has decided that it can't. And that is a self-fulfilling prophecy. So candidates have to essentially self-fund. They have to raise their own money. They don't get a lot of support from the party. And what you wind up with is no building of infrastructure from election to election. In the primaries, there were a lot of television commercials for Steve Garvey. Guess who paid for them? Adam Schiff's campaign.
Yes.
Because he wanted to elevate any Republican at all into the general election and not run against another Democrat. And we've seen that several times in a lot of races, even in assembly races. We see people messing around in our jungle primary, saying we're going to talk about how much this person is just like Reagan, or how much this person is just like Trump, knowing that that will bring the Republican electorate out for that person. And then in the general election, voters say, how come Steve Garvey didn't run any TV commercials? Sorry, but it wasn't Steve Garvey who ran those commercials. And this is a warped situation. As you've said, this is a much more Republican state than it realizes, or than the media recognizes. So it's there for the taking.
It is.
If we work at educating the voters and organizing. As Jen said earlier, if we do the work, it will happen.
Yeah,
I
I agree.
completely agree with that. And I want to point to another result. But I want to talk about the state legislature a little bit. But I want to point to following on from that point you just made, Susan, in terms of working hard. And there's a really exciting result, which is just down the road from where you are, Susan, Huntington Beach. So Huntington Beach, and, to full disclosure, the Tony Strickland, who's on the council there and was the mayor and led what I'm about to talk about, good friend, big part of my work in California. So a few years ago, Huntington Beach Council was a Democrat council, the city council, 6-1 Democrat, six Democrats, 1 Republican. This week, it voted out the final Democrats. It's now 7-0 Republican.
Wow.
7-0.
Wow.
The Republicans, led by Tony Strickland, took power a couple of years ago. It was 4-3. And they got to work. I mean, it was a very effective operation to take control. And then they delivered common sense policies. With that 4-3 margin, they cleaned up the streets. They took the homeless people off the street. They did all the things that we're told you can't do in California. And they put on the ballot initiatives, for example, on voter ID that passed. They stood up to the state government on these the bullying on housing, where they wanted to turn a suburban community with single family homes into something that looked like Miami. And they said, no, that's not what, and they fought back, and they were called it was Gavin Newsom's number one, enemy in Huntington Beach. They kept calling them MAGA extremists and filing lawsuit after lawsuit, etc. But they stuck to their guns and they delivered real results. And what's the result? 7-0 Huntington Beach Council. And so it really shows you that if you work hard and you're direct and you don't water down your positions, because actually, there's so many people say, oh, well, the only way a Republican can win in California is you look more like a Democrat. No, that's not true. On the core issues, on the economic issues, on the public safety, on law, quality of life issues, people want Republican policies.
They absolutely do. And they don't want to be taxed out of their homes, and they
Yes.
don't want to give all their money to the government out of their paycheck. And what's complicated about this? Really nothing. People want their kids to be educated in quality public schools, which we don't have. They want a secure border. They want a balanced budget in Sacramento that's not driving investment and business out of the state because of high taxes and regulation. They want California to run rationally. We have an insane energy policy, which is like a giant tax on everything we buy. Why are we doing this to ourselves? It doesn't accomplish anything. And it certainly isn't selling in the rest of the state.
Exactly. And the energy policy, I'm glad you mentioned that. I mean, we'll have to wrap it up in a minute, but I mean, that's going to be, as people know, I'm really focused now on California, and there'll be much more from me on that in the months and years ahead. But I think the energy policy, the climate, that set of issues around climate and energy are just so destructive, and people don't realize it. And we got to really make that clear, that when you talk about driving up costs and making life impossible for people and businesses and families, that interconnected set of climate and energy policies are really at the heart of it, as well as all the direct taxes. But the way you just put it, which is that itself is a tax, is so good. Katy, can we just end with talking about the legislature, which I don't know. I mean, I spent a lot of time trying to help some of these candidates. It feels like the kind of results in the legislature so far. I mean, again, we don't have final results. It's kind of okay, but not great. I mean, you're in Sacramento. You see this very directly. You're in there a lot. What are your thoughts on the state legislature, which, let's remember, plays a huge, probably more than anything else we've discussed in terms of the daily lives that we all have to lead here?
Well, as we were talking earlier, we know that our legislature is a Democrat super majority, which is a huge problem, because the Republicans, the most they can do is hope to get some media to help kill a bad bill. I do see that it looks Carl DeMaio's winning, so that's
he's
another
great.
Republican.
Yes, yeah,
yes, that's
so
huge.
that's a hold of it. That's not a gain.
He'll be a big voice, though.
Oh, for sure. No, he's fantastic. He was
Yeah.
on the show just before Election Day. He's exactly what we've been talking about.
Exactly.
And like just fighting and clear and
Right.
And also, Susan, to your point earlier, I mean, he's someone who does build infrastructure and
Yes, he does.
gets things going from election to election.
I think what Susan pointed out is so accurate, though. Even our Assembly and Senate candidates don't really get much help from the California Republican Party. And so we've got kind of an internal issue in California that needs to be addressed at some point as well. But again, election results, I don't see the size and scope of the legislature changing that much. And given that Gavin Newsom has 2 more years on his term, it's going to be business as usual, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like we're going to pick up one Senate seat in Orange County. That's Stephen Choi against Josh Newman, but it's still a supermajority.
Yeah.
I don't know if we're going to pick up any in the assembly.
Yeah, it doesn't look like it from my point of view at this point.
No. I mean, it's good. I mean, Josh Hoover's great. He's up near where
Yes.
you. I did an event for him
Yeah,
just
he's
recently.
wonderful.
He looks like he's holding on comfortably, which is great. So, and I think Carl DeMai will really shake things up. I agree with that. That's a good result.
I'm banking on that.
But he was running against another Republican, so that's not it doesn't sort of move us towards getting rid of the supermajority, but
Right.
he's a really, really energetic. Well, everyone who just listened to I really recommend it, actually. If you haven't heard it, listen to, I think it was last week's episode. We did Candidate Corner with Carl, because he really captured the energy and attitude I think we need in the fight to turn things around in California. Okay, the last thing, I just want to connect it back to the national story and ask both of you to comment on this, and then we'll wrap it up, which is, of course, one of the main things that really stood out in the national result for Trump is the Latino vote. He got the highest proportion of Latino voters ever for a Republican, and Latino men won them. And I just want to something like 45, 46%, something like that. And I just want to put that in context. I say this number, I know these numbers because I use them a lot. I looked it up. When the last pre-Trump presidential election, so 2012, Obama-Romney, in the Latino vote, Obama won that. I mean, I'm maybe out by 1 or 2 points, 72% to Romney's 23%. And now you have Trump winning among Latino men and 45%. It's an amazing transformation. It really is a revolution. I mean, people use the word realignment, but it's a revolution. Given the fact that Latinos are now the largest group in California, not necessarily the largest voting group, but the largest in terms of population and growing. So the Latino demographically in California, Latino is the largest group. 40%, white is 35%, Asian is 15%, black is 5%, native and other is another 5%. But in public schools now, the last number I saw, it's 56% Latino.
Yeah.
So this is growing. So to me, this is great grounds for optimism about our ability to change California. Susan, do you want to take that?
Sure. Well, after the Romney loss, the GOP commissioned what they called an autopsy of the election, and it concluded that the Republicans were never going to win another election in America unless they came out for a path to citizenship for all the illegal aliens who have crossed the border into the country. And they went with that. That was their philosophy. They were telling candidates up and down the ballot in California, oh, you have to be for, quote, comprehensive immigration reform, or you'll never, ever win the Latino vote, and we'll never win again, ever. And Donald Trump came down the escalator and said a few things that were, let's just say, a contradiction of that, and won the election. And he was campaigning on mass deportation. He was talking about the biggest mass deportation since the Eisenhower administration, and he carried 40% or more of the Latino vote, including the border counties in Texas, one which hadn't been Republican since the 19th century. So what does that tell us? It tells us that the Latino vote is not a monolith, and it's not concerned about the rights of illegal immigrants ahead of the economy and the other issues that all Americans care about. So the Republicans did this to themselves, and Donald Trump is undoing it, and it's about time.
Yes, and let's make this the final point, Katy. what's beautiful about it in a way is that it contradicts not just the autopsy, it contradicts the insulting and divisive narrative of the media and the left, which puts people in boxes and sees people through their group identity. The real reason, seems to me, that the Trump version of the Republican idea, this new conservative populism, whatever you want to call it, the working class focus, I mean, he calls it common sense, which I think is a good term.
Yeah.
It's not ideological, it's very practical. It doesn't see people in racial categories. Yes, of course, it is in a technical sense. It targets Latino voters in the sense of going to Latino communities and engaging with them in a practical sense. But in terms of the message and the policy and the ideas, it says you're no different. You're just Americans who want the American dream, and we want to help you. We want to help you make more money and buy your own home and start and run your own business, and we're just going to treat you exactly the same.
Exactly. I think, as I said earlier, the left and the media kept referring to the white middle class, completely ignoring the Latino middle class, the Black middle class, the Asian middle class, and the working class made up of all different ethnic groups as well. Donald Trump talks with people. He doesn't talk at them. And Latinos love him. Blacks love him for that reason. And I think that this election showed that Democrats and their identity politics has been an epic failure. And as you said, Steve, they try to put everybody into boxes instead of recognizing the American people. We are all one. We are the Americans. And most of us actually, whether we're wealthy or not, want decent housing, no crime, fine paying jobs. We want to be able to afford our groceries and send our kids to good public schools. It's pretty simple. What's interesting also is that I can assure you that the left in California that continues voting for these leftist policies, they live like Republicans.
I think that was they're great. I just want to wrap it up with a couple of thoughts, but that was a great discussion. Thank you to both of you. I think that, for me, it's such this whole election result, but both some of the specific California outcomes, but the national story, it's so, there's a sort of beauty to it. It really is, because it brings to fruition something I've been, arguing for and writing about and talking about for so long. I mentioned at the beginning that I was live on air when we had to cut to Brett Baier announcing that Fox Decision Desk had called the election for President Trump. Funnily enough, I also recalled that, we've been here now. We moved to California in 2012, but in 2016, I went back to the UK to campaign for Brexit, in favor of Brexit. And I was part of the campaign, and I was a spokesperson for the campaign. And I happened to be live on air on the BBC, a Brexit results program, at the moment that Brexit was called. I've just remembered that. But the reason I mention that is because this all goes back, it really started with Trump and this focus on lifting up working people, the people who've been left behind and undermined by decades of establishment thinking and policy from Republicans and Democrats, focusing on the working class and so on. And I said at the time, in 2016, just at the beginning of the Trump era, that the Republican Party had the opportunity to become a multiracial working class coalition. And what is just stunning is how that has absolutely been delivered, and then some, by this result, and through Trump's leadership of the Republican Party. Exactly as Susan, you just said, totally in contradicting all the prevailing wisdom from the establishment argument that had gone on for years. And it's just it's a wonderful thing, and to me a very American thing, because in the end, what this is about is restoring the American dream, and the next move, I think, needs to be restoring the California dream, and we have a couple of years to do that here. All right, joining me now, someone you just heard me and the others singing his praises, because he has led an absolute revolution in Huntington Beach. We talked about it just now. This is the man that made it happen. Full disclosure, a very, very dear friend of mine and someone who's closely involved in everything we're trying to achieve for California. Tony Strickland is here, member of Huntington Beach City Council, previously the mayor, and as I said, the leader of what do you call it now? You've got 770
Yeah, we're now
on the
calling
council.
ourselves the MAGA-nificent Seven. Yeah, no, it was a great election night from the top all the way down to local government here in Huntington Beach, Surf City, USA.
So what's really interesting about that, and I will get into the detail of it, but like when you just the fact that you're claiming that and you're owning that, the MAGA-nificent Seven, right? Because they thought that they would crush you with that branding, right? This is the thing. So what's really interesting, so that you took control. And I remember doing an event for you in Huntington Beach not long ago, and the term that you're using when there were four of you were the Fab Four, and I made a joke about the Beatles because that's what they were called back in the day. But when it was 4-3, and you were bringing in all the policies that you're just about to tell us about, the thing that I think everyone needs to understand is that you really were and are public enemy number one for Gavin Newsom politically and Rob Bonta and the state, and they're constantly suing you and attacking you and doing all this stuff and branding you MAGA extremists. And you have media, I think, was it Time Mag, all these media, global publications focusing on how these MAGA people have taken over a city in Orange County in California, but yet the voters just told us they want more of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's amazing. As you said, Steve, when I first jumped in, my background was in the legislature, and Congresswoman Michelle Steele and her husband Sean came to me and said, "Hey, the city is on the wrong path. It's 6-1 Democrat, far left. Homelessness was everywhere. Crime was up." And they asked me to run. I never thought about running for local government. I got elected to state legislature when I was 28 years old. But then as I walk around Main Street, as I walk around my city that I live in, I said, it needs leadership. And so I decided to move forward. And then there's 3 other great candidates who they're strong conservatives. We came together and campaigned as a team. We did a contract with Huntington Beach, and we were tabbed locally as the Fab Four. And so we campaigned as the Fab Four. We did over 100 events together around the city, and we did a contract with Huntington Beach. It seems simplistic, but we said we're going to, fix our homeless crisis. We're going to make crime illegal again, and that we're going to fight for business and push back all these liberal mandates coming from Sacramento. And we'll unleash our city attorney, Michael Gates, to go and fight in court and not take it anymore. As old song says, we're not going to take it anymore. So we got elected, all 4 of us, which is unprecedented here in Huntington Beach.
Sorry, when was that election? So I want to get people to get a sense of the timing here.
Well, yeah, that was 2022 was that election.
Right. So just 2 years ago.
Right. Okay, I'll just go back. If we were going to go chronologically. So the first day we came in, they elected me mayor because I had the political experience. So I was the first one in Huntington Beach's history to become mayor on the first day that you got elected to the council. And so historically, they always said the person with senior leadership. And of course, we're not going to give it to the 3 liberal Democrats who are left on that board because we pretty much campaigned against them. I joke around. It was like a Seinfeld episode. Have you ever seen the one that says you do the opposite of George Costanza? That's what we said when we were campaigning. We're going to do the opposite of what this current council does. And certainly, I got fortunate enough that my colleagues made me mayor, and we pushed back immediately. We immediately unleashed Michael Gates, our city attorney, to push back on the state mandates. And so we're pushing back on the housing mandates. Here in Huntington Beach, we're 95% built out. And what Gavin Newsom tried to do is he mandated that we increase our population by 50% and pretty much turn our suburban coastal community into an urban center overnight. And I could go I could talk an hour about that policy. But what the liberals want to do in Sacramento is they want to urbanize everyone, and they hate the car. There's a reason why in California we have the highest gas tax in the country, the highest car registration fee in the country. We spend money in transportation. We don't do it on roads and highways. We do it on mass transit that the masses don't use. And what they want to do is get you out of your car and urbanize and make everywhere like San Francisco. And so we said in Huntington Beach, Gavin Newsom, you destroyed San Francisco, and we're not going to allow you to destroy Huntington Beach. And so we're pushing back on those housing mandates. And when we came to crime, our city attorney contacted the DA of Orange County and asked for the ability to go after people who commit small crimes. So we're making crime illegal again. And the first day that we came in as a new council, we had a homeless czar that was making more money than our city manager. I thought that was absurd. Think about that, Steve. Do you think that person's going to want to solve the homeless crisis if they're making more money then the city manager, the one that runs the whole city. So we got rid of the homeless czar day one. And we went to our law enforcement and says, we're going to enforce our encampment laws. We're going to do whatever we can, because I don't think it's compassionate to leave them on the street. Our citizens deserve to play, their kids deserve to play in parks without homeless. Our businesses deserve not to have homeless in front of their business. And we're one of the only cities in Orange County where homelessness is down dramatically from our leadership.
So can I just on that, what's really interesting about that is that you're living proof of the point that I made, because during the course of earlier in the year when we had the Supreme Court ruling, which was in Grants Pass versus Oregon, which basically overturned what everyone cites. Every other leader apart from you and your team in California, the Boise ruling, right? Boise, Idaho, which said that you can't enforce anti-camping laws. You can't do that unless there's all these conditions have been met. And I always said they're hiding behind that, right? And they're being pushed by the far left activists and the homeless industrial complex and so on. That's because the ruling was actually you can't enforce the law unless you have shelter available for everyone who's homeless at any particular time. I say, yeah, but the definition of shelter is up to you. You don't have to mean, it doesn't have to mean $800,000 apartments, which is how they sort of handled it in LA. So tell us, I go into that a bit more detail, because
So
it's a central policy.
Navigation center here in Huntington Beach. And again, we get them off the street, and I don't think it's compassionate to leave them on the street. What we do is we make sure that they go and they get, and at that navigation center that we have county services. A lot of this is drug addiction, alcohol addiction, mental health issues. They get the county services that they deserve and get them off the street. And what ends up happening is those who don't want those services, they don't stay in Huntington Beach because they know we're going to pick them up. And one of my liberal colleagues, well, you're not solving the problem because we're not fixing the world. And I say, hey, look, I represent Huntington Beach. And what we're doing is we're being compassionate by getting them off the ground. And we have transitioned. A lot of these, we have hundreds of former homelessness that are now back up on their feet because we enforce those encampment laws. And again, we did it with less money. Gavin Newsom spent billions and billions of dollars, and across the state, it's getting worse. In San Francisco, it got worse. I used to love going to San Francisco. It was one of my favorite places to go. And actually, I thought it was one of the best places to go in the world.
Yeah.
They destroyed it. Gavin Newsom destroyed San Francisco based on his policies. And we're not going to allow him to do that to Huntington Beach. And so we're proud because we're one of the only cities where homelessness is down dramatically, and we didn't have to spend billions of dollars to do it.
And just to underline the point, you did this before the Supreme Court ruling, which now, London Breed in San Francisco has just been voted out, by the way.
And now Gavin Newsom's like,
now we can do it because we had this.
These cities. Yeah, right.
Yeah, it's outrageous. You were doing it before. And so that's the real proof that it could have been done. So it's a very important argument politically, because if they try and, show that suddenly, they're solving this problem and their hands were tied before the Supreme Court ruling. And so it was inevitable that you had this sort of decade or more of utterly cruel policy that left people to be on the streets and suffer in the way that they did, and for the broader community to have to experience that, and businesses and people and kids on their way to school and all the kind of effects of this. And there's nothing we could do. It's simply not true. And the money that was wasted need not have been wasted, because you've shown a different way of doing it right there.
Correct. And that's the key. The money that they wasted, they were missing $24 billion. They didn't know where it's going. There was no accountability. They were spending all these billions of dollars on what I call the homeless industrial complex. They're giving money to their friends or consultants, et cetera. And the problem was getting worse. It wasn't getting better. And we showed here in Huntington Beach that conservative leadership works. In fact, Donald Trump, when he came out here a year ago, and a lot of people were abandoning Donald Trump, he called me and asked for my endorsement. And I said, of course. He goes, I understand you were with me in 2016. I said, no, Mr. President, I was with you in 2015 when you had 18 candidates. And he loved that answer, by the way. But I jumped on, and he called me his favorite mayor because his quote, not mine, I'm showing that conservative leadership works, doing everything that you have to do to make a place work. And we don't have homeless encampments like the other cities in California. And we brought down, the crime. And we're showing that, economic prosperity can work. here in Huntington Beach.
So could I talk about the crime now and get into that policy area? Because you said you used the term that we've all been using in relation to Prop 36, which just passed overwhelmingly, which is make crime illegal again. But again, you're showing that you did this beforehand, before Prop 36, you were able to do it.
And I would say, when you say me, I always want to say, I want to include my three council colleagues, what we call the Fab Four, Gracie Vandermark, Pat Burns, and Casey McCann, and a great city attorney named Michael Gates. We're all working together to make sure this happens. So I want to make sure I start with that. But yeah, no, we have a fantastic city attorney that wanted to take this on. And we said, we need to have accountability here in our society. We are a destination city. We're known as Surf City, USA. We get 13 million visitors a year. Now, if someone comes here and they have a bad time and they don't feel safe, they're not coming back. And if we want economic prosperity here in Huntington Beach, we need to make sure people feel safe. So we bring accountability into our city. We have a tremendous city police chief, Eric Parra, who does a remarkable job. And we make sure we prosecute those small crimes. We make sure that there's accountability. If you're going to commit a crime, you're going to get prosecuted. And I'm proud to say that our city attorney, that we have a directly elected city attorney who loves Huntington Beach, grew up here in Huntington Beach, has done a remarkable job at making crime illegal here in Huntington Beach.
So why were you able to do it there, but it wasn't possible for others to do it in other cities?
Correct. Well, here's the thing is you have to have political will. And we've been attacked, as you know, Steve. You've seen all the articles and our local papers, and not like different than what happens to any conservative across the nation. We get attacked pretty dramatically because we're the MAGA folks. But at the end of the day, our policies do work when they're implemented. Crime is down. We're bringing in new economic development. We have an air show. We have the guy who started Cirque du Soleil is going to bring in this show. And again, I'm an artistic person, but I met with him and he's bringing in the show like Cirque du Soleil here to Huntington Beach, and he wants to be in Surf City, USA. And people are coming here because they feel safe, and it's a wonderful city to be. By the way, anybody who's listening, please come to Huntington Beach, Surf City, USA. You'll have a great, magnificent time here. You're going to feel safe, and it's a family-friendly city to come visit, unlike what Gavin Newsom did to San Francisco.
It's a little bit like the Florida model, but from a city, right? You're showing that it can be done. And you get very quick results when you implement common sense policies. Can I ask you about the politics of it? So you use the word conservative a lot, and that, of course, is something that people say, well, you can't say that in California. It's so democratic and whatever. And so, of course, it's true that you've got it's not, California's not monolithic. We've just been talking about the results, and the way I put it is, California voted Republican this week and didn't realize it. If you look at actually the results on not just Prop 36 on crime, but on taxes, with Prop 5 and on rent control and minimum wage and so on. And then the recalls that we spoke about and Gascon and so on, right? There's a lot of encouraging results. But that word conservative, how does that go down? When you're in Orange County, which used to be very firmly Republican, now is considered a purple county. You had Katie Porter until not long ago, one of the members of Congress there. How do you make it attractive? Because, a word that actually the left have tried to demonize.
A great question, Steve. Look, I gave this speech on Monday, and I talked about, I've been involved. I joke around, when I die, I'm going to be buried in Chicago, so I can remain politically active. I'm not well-rounded. I love sports and politics. But when I was 12 years old, think about this. When I was 12, I was asked, President Reagan was president at the time. It was Christmas time. In my local paper, I said, what would you give President Reagan for a Christmas gift? And my friend gave a stupid answer, said a Duran Duran album or something like that. But
That's a good answer. I think I love Duran Duran.
Yeah,
I grew up with Duran Duran.
I do too. But I said I would give President Reagan an American flag because he's a true patriot. He wants to let you keep more of your hard-earned dollar, and he wants to beat back communism and beat Russia and the Soviet Union. Now think about that. I was 12 years old. When a 12-year-old can articulate in a simplistic fashion the policies of the President of the United States, there's a reason why he was called the great communicator. I think we have to have optimistic message and optimistic people go forward. And I think our policies are common sense policies. And I think we're winning over. I mean, look at just what happened on Tuesday. a huge percentage of African American vote came our way. Hispanics, Latinos are coming our way because we're talking. I'm running for full disclosure. I'm going to run for the state senate in a special election out here. In my brand is going to be I'm bringing Surf City common sense to Sacramento, a place that doesn't have common sense. And so I do believe with a strong message, a strong record, we can take back California. And it's often said when California has a cough, the rest of the nation has a cold. There's no way you can ignore the 5th largest economy in the world. We need to take back California. We can't give up on California. And many people, I actually take your quote, Steve. When people say, why didn't you leave? Why didn't you go to Texas or Tennessee? I said, well, I'm not the one that messed up the state. Gavin Newsom, Kamala Harris did. They're the ones that should leave California, not me. So I actually steal your line from you because I firmly believe California is worth fighting for.
100%. And what I love is the fact that you've shown that, and you've shown you get a reaction. So if you're just clear in what you argue, and then you get, and the really exciting thing about this week is that you're rewarded for it if you deliver results, and actually it can happen quickly. This is the thing that's so cool, is that you've got, you take power 4-3 in 2022. You have just 2 years of implementing common sense policies, and now you're 7-0. I mean, that's an amazing result.
And let me talk about how dramatic of a win that is. Historically, I was told that there's only been like 2 incumbents in the last 80 years of lost here in Huntington Beach. It doesn't happen very often that incumbents, it's hard to beat incumbents. All 3 of the liberal Democratic incumbents lost by the 3 challengers that the Fab Four helped recruit to run. And we all campaigned together and we talked about our policies from voter ID.
I want to talk about that. Yeah, because that's a big thing we haven't mentioned yet.
To implementing our voter ID that we passed here, to pushing back on the Sacramento mandates, to making crime illegal again, and keeping the policies moving forward of the Fab Four. We all campaigned together, and all 3 liberal Democrat incumbents lost. And that is a huge victory that all 3 of the candidates that we backed got across the finish line. And now we're dubbing ourselves the MAGA-nificent Seven.
It's a really big story. Let's talk about the voter ID, because that became a national story. And I talk about it all the time. The way I usually set it up is when you have all these unbelievably patronizing, pompous lectures from the left about we're protecting democracy, from the Republicans who overturn elections. Well, guess what? That's exactly what they tried to do with you. So let's just, I'll lay out the facts, and then you can fill in the sort of detail. And I'd love to know where we stand on it and what's the latest, which is that you put on the ballot voter ID. The voters passed it. It was approved. This was in March this year in the primary cycle. And was it almost the next day, Newsom and Bonto, you were saying, right, we're suing you to overturn it. Then they got their cronies in the legislature to put through a bill in the legislature to ban any other jurisdiction from implementing voter ID, to make it illegal to require voter ID, not just not have it, but to ban it, which is utterly extreme and insane. But where does it stand? You just told me that you actually implemented it for this election. So is there a lawsuit? Where's the whole thing sit right now?
The 2026 election, in order so we can get everything prepared to make sure it's smooth, because we got to make sure it works. Because if the left's going to say, oh, it doesn't work if it doesn't work here. So we're working. That's why our city clerk got elected. By the way, our city clerk ran on implementing voter ID. Her name's Lisa Lane Barnes. Ran against someone from the left that said, I am not going to implement the voter ID. Again, something that our citizens voted to put in our charter, which is our Constitution. So she was going to ignore the will of the people of Huntington Beach. And so there's a reason why Lisa Lane Barnes won by 20 points. So let's back up a little bit. Our democracy doesn't work if people don't have faith in election outcomes. 3 presidential campaigns since 2000 have challenged the presidential outcome. Bush v. Gore, then you had Hillary Clinton, and then Trump. And so when I was in the legislature, I authored voter ID initiative, and it always got killed up in Sacramento. When I was here in city council, I looked at cities like San Jose, San Francisco, Santa Ana. They have different things like, choice voting. They have, felons voting, 16-year-olds voting. Because in our California Constitution, Article 11, Section 5B of our California Constitution said municipalities have the ability to do their voter laws. And so I knew that right away. It's in our California Constitution. So here in Huntington Beach, we introduced and put on the ballot for our voters to put in our Huntington Beach Constitution, it's called a charter, the voter ID. And the left went nuts. Rob Bonta said, "Oh, it's illegal." He sued us. And I said, you're a bad lawyer because it's in our Constitution. It's a frivolous lawsuit. He's already lost 2 other cases to 2 other cities. We have this in our California Constitution, and they know it. And
In
so,
your charter city constitution.
correct. Well, no, it's in the California Constitution that municipalities have the ability to do election law. And so it's Article 11, Section 5B that says that we have the ability as a local government. And so moving forward, they know that they're not going to win that. So they got.
Sorry, can I just stop on that, Tony? So, because I've heard you talk about the fact that you're a charter city, which gives you more freedom and power. I'd love you to talk a little bit about that. We don't have too much time, but also, just to be clear, so you're saying that your ability to implement voter ID does not come from charter city status. It comes from
it does. It comes from the Constitution, which is very important to understand. It comes from the California Constitution, not our charter. It comes, however, when the voters voted here in Huntington Beach for voter ID, they put it in our charter, which is our Constitution. But the California Constitution is the one that gives us the authority. So David Min introduces a bill to make it illegal, and they pass it, and Gavin Newsom passes it. And I told David Min, it's worth this piece of paper right here, because unless you do a constitutional amendment, your bill is worth nothing. And
so this is the bill that Newsom
that signed, correct?
Well, but also he initiated it, right? He told them to do it, because I think that was his reaction. We're going to make this illegal. So they passed a bill that has no legal teeth.
Correct. And that's what I've been telling everybody. Everybody's worried, but I'm like, and I told the state senator, David Min, who authored this, I said, look, the only way that you can outlaw voter ID in California is by putting a constitutional amendment. I encouraged him to do so because I want that on the ballot for Californians to vote on. Nationally, Gallup, 66% of Democrats support voter identification laws. In fact, I'm going to push as the next state senator. I'm going to push for voter integrity and voter ID. And I'm hoping that other municipalities around California and around the nation push for voter integrity and voter ID laws, because we could change this movement from the bottom up and force the issue. And I'm going to force the issue here in California, because people have a right to have faith in the election outcomes. And by the way, Steve, people need, as you know, IDs for everything part of your life, to get government assistance, to get on a plane.
Oh, it's ridiculous.
This whole nonsense that the other side says people don't have identification is just that nonsense.
I mean, I remember the first time I was here, and someone said to me, you got to take your driver license, early on, you got to always carry your driver license, because when you're driving, because it's a felony, or I don't remember how they put it, not to drive without your driver license, so the whole thing is just so absurd. What about their laws? So I understand about the law that they've passed. That's a total waste of time. It has no teeth because it's in the state constitution. What about the lawsuit? What is that? You say it's frivolous. Is it going anywhere? What happens?
We haven't heard yet when it's going to be heard in court, but we're very confident that we're going to win in court. And I think the state is very confident. Think about coming from the state. When we were campaigning for this, they say, oh, it's illegal, it's illegal, it's illegal. But then they carry a bill to try to make it illegal. They know they're just trying to go after us. And unlike other cities and unlike some other elected leaders, they try to put pressure on us. This is the same with the housing crisis. Pressure on us. They get the media to put pressure on us to cave. The great news is me and my team, our team, we have the backbone, because we know, well, one, the law's on our side and the people are on our side, and we're going to fight. And as Trump, we're fighters. We're fighters here in Huntington Beach. And the 3 new guys that just got elected are also fighters. And we're proving that conservative leadership works. And our hope is what we've done here in Huntington Beach spreads across the state of California. And we're part of that team that takes back California for common sense policies. By the way, I'm proud to say this, if you don't mind, Steve. I want to read this. This is what the Washington Post said. The Washington Post said the conservatives who now control city government in Huntington Beach, they're the ideological counterweights to the state liberal leaders. And I got goosebumps, because the Washington Post notices we're the ones here in Huntington Beach that are pushing back on what's going on in Sacramento.
Yeah, well, that's why it's so significant. That's why I've been highlighting it this week in my sort of roundup of what's happened in California, because it is the model. This is how we deliver that outcome, which is fighting for common sense, getting elected, delivering practical, positive outcomes, and you get rewarded for it by the people. It's not complicated, but you got to have that attitude of just ignoring the nonsense and propaganda from the left and from the media, and just really going for it and focusing on non-ideological, pragmatic solutions to everyday problems. Tony, you're the best. Thank you so much. Love seeing you today, and well done.
Thanks so much for having me on. And Steve, thanks for your leadership. There's a lot of people who got across the finish line here in California because you went around and helped a lot of common sense candidates. And I want to thank you for your leadership and everything you're doing to turn around this golden state. And I'm a big fan. So thanks for having me on.
We will do it together. As we said, as my organization is called, we'll make it golden together. Thank you, Tony. Great to see you.
Thanks, Steve.
All right. I feel so energized by that conversation. I think it is just so exciting to see what can be done when we really go for it. And as I said, deliver practical results for people. That's what this is all about. That's the really big takeaway for me from this whole election, which is just being practical, common sense, not ideological. That's where the left has gone so wrong. They got so far removed from regular people and their concerns. And it's all this stuff that's coming out of the universities, academic stuff, and it's also intellectual. And even the language they use, it's just so far removed from regular people's lives. They've completely lost the plot. And that's why it was so great to see a really big and clear repudiation of all of that. Look, whether the Democrats learn the lesson, I don't know. But what we can do for our part is continue to move forward based on this common sense, positive, practical way of thinking about politics, which is not there to push some ideological agenda. It is there to help people with the day-to-day things that are bothering them, to solve problems, and then let people follow their dreams and live their lives. And that is the real lesson from all of this. And when you do that, you get rewarded for it. So for me, that is a hugely positive outcome. Thank you to all our guests today. Thank you for being with us through the election. Soon we'll be thinking about the next round, 2026. You can bet the Democrats are already jockeying for their primary for 2028. So it never really stops. But let's just have a moment to reflect on what a positive outcome that was. We'll see you back here for the next episode of The Steve Hilton Show next week. Remember to follow us on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. We'll see you next week.